you ever heard someone make this statement? You know what? I have this dream to do something, right? Or have you ever had someone say, there's this thing that I've been dreaming about being a part of. Maybe you've said that yourself. Maybe you've heard friends or family say that. But I want you to understand, dreams for our life are powerful. They're needed. Dreams are opportunities for us to grow, to move, and to change. What I didn't know is there are several people throughout history that have had dreams that have led to them either starting something or doing something for and with people. Like, did you know that Albert Einstein's theory of relativity actually came from a dream? I don't understand what that is, but he had a dream. There's Elias Howe, that's the inventor of the sewing machine. He had a dream on how to make the sewing machine. You have Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison had a dream about how to make the light bulb. There's an amazing doctor by the name of Dr. Vivian Thomas, and this gentleman was able to create a vaccine for what is called the blue baby syndrome, and it all came from a dream. Then there's the author Robert Louis Stevenson. If you don't know who that author is, that's the author that wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So I don't know if it was a dream or a nightmare. You figure it out, but that's how he wrote that book. And then there's always Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who had a dream about how people were going to live together. Now, what you may or may not know is that the owner, creator of Google, Larry Page, had a dream in the 1990s. When Larry was just 23 years old as a graduate student at Stanford, he had a dream that would forever change his life. In fact, in 2009, he was giving a speech at the University of Michigan, and he shared firsthand how he received this idea about creating Google. Here, let me read to you what he said. He said, you know what it's like to wake up in the middle of the night with a vivid dream? And you know how if you don't have a pencil or paper by the bed to write it down, that you're going to forget it by the morning. Well, I had one of those dreams when I was 23 years old, when I suddenly woke up and I was thinking, what if we could download the whole website, the whole web, and just keep the links? And I grabbed a pen and I started writing. Here's what you need to know about Google. Google receives over 63,000 searches per second on any given day. And as a market value, it is at worth of $739 billion. Every day, an average of 100 million people use Google, with an average person conducting 3 to 4 searches every single day. In fact, some of you are doing it right now. It's like, I'm done with this message, right? So, here's what I think you need to know. The dreams in our life matter. And if we are people of faith, if we've said yes to a relationship with Jesus, then we need to understand that the Bible tells us, lets us know that God is the one giving us those dreams. In fact, Luke in the book of Acts is he's quoting from the book of Joel when he wrote this. In Acts 2:17, in the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit upon all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. In those days, I will pour out my spirit, even on my servants. Men and women alike, they will prophesy. Here's my question. What dreams do you have? What visions do you have? Here, maybe it's the dream of being a chain breaker for your family, right? Maybe as a high school or middle school student, you're going to break the chain of education and you're going to get a college degree. Maybe you're going to be the chain breaker in your family by not getting a divorce. Maybe you're going to be the chain breaker in your family and you're not going to continue the life of addiction that other family members has continued on. Maybe you're going to be the chain breaker where you can say, you know what? I've been married 50 years. Maybe you're going to start a business. a business that helps people. Maybe you're going to start a nonprofit that encourages the world to grow in faith. Maybe you're going to be like my family and I, and we started a church. Right? You have these dreams that God gives to us, and God is the God of dreams, and God has revealed himself time and time again throughout the Bible to people so that he can guide them and direct them down the path that he wants them to go in order to accomplish his purposes, not ours. Sometimes that's where we get things confused. And so whether our dreams are about creating something like Google, if you create Google, we encourage you to tithe to the church. Sorry, I'm just kidding. Or maybe it's like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who had a dream for people to live differently. What we need to understand is there's a principle about dreams that we need to walk away with today. And this principle is simple, but it's hard to follow. It's this: God dreams have a destination, but not always straightforward directions. God dreams have a destination, but not always straightforward directions. As I have learned reading through the Bible and from following Jesus for over 25 years, there's always a destination. There's always this, hey, we're going to go do this. God's leading his people to do this. But 99.9% of the times, there are not straightforward directions to get to that destination. Now, what I want you to understand about me is I'm the guy who takes my Google map and says, what's the fastest route, right? I want to know, how am I going to get there? And many times I start out on a drive or where I'm going, and all of a sudden there's that red line that shows up on the map, and then all of a sudden it says rerouting, and you go, no! And then I argue with the voice I'm like, I don't want you to tell me where I'm going. I mean, have you ever done that where you're driving? You know the directions you're going to go, but then it starts telling you different things and you continue to drive where you think you're supposed to drive, and all of a sudden you're in a traffic jam? Sorry, been there, done that. I was like, I got to get to this funeral. I know where I'm going. No, don't reroute me. Don't reroute. I know where to go. So I start driving and I stop and I'm like, crap. Should have listened. Right? Here's what I've understood about following Jesus. That when I'm on his journey, when I'm following him, the destination that he's put before me is always clear. But how I get there is always up to him. And it's for his purposes and for his glory and for what he wants. And it's always different than what I have planned. Here's a story that we can see this played out in the Old Testament. It's the story of Joseph. And you're going to see what I mean when it comes to the destination is clear, but the directions are not straightforward. I want you to read with me in Genesis chapter 37, verses 2 through 11. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended to his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. Good names, right? But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brother was doing. Now, I read this, and Joseph, his intent is showing his father that he is worthy of leadership. He's trustworthy. His brothers thought he was a snitch, right? And we know the motto, snitches get stitches. I'm just saying, right? So we see this kind of happening. Now, in verse 3, we start seeing something even more. Read with me. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. Favoritism is never a good thing, especially as a parent. Because one child's going to recognize it, the other child's going to recognize it, and there's going to be what is called bitterness. So we have bitterness in here. So one day, Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph. A beautiful robe. Joseph is giving a robe, a tunic. Now, what I want you to understand is Jacob gave this to Joseph as a way of showing he is going to be an overseer. He's going to oversee his brothers. Now, I want you to understand, remember, Joseph is the youngest. He's overseeing his older brothers. Do you think that's going to sit well? No, not at all. Now, Pastor Aaron, a couple of weeks ago, he referred to this because everybody goes, oh, Joseph in his coat of many colors. The Bible does not say coat of many colors. The play that's on Broadway is wrong. It was said, it was ornate, it was amazing, right? So what we need to understand is maybe this was just a Hebrew bedazzled, right? Some of you will figure that out later. But his brothers hated him. Look, verse 4. His brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't even say a kind word to him. Joseph's not popular. Joseph is not liked by his brothers. But he's being put in a position of leadership. And let's just be honest, he's not really ready for his place of leadership. So, verse 5. One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him even more. Listen to this dream, he said. We're out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine. See, some of you are family, you got your siblings, you're going, oh no, I'll make sure he knows Jesus before he meets him, right? Look at how his brothers respond. So you think you're going to be our king, do you? Do you actually think you're going to reign over us? Notice what it says, and they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Verse 5. Soon Joseph had another dream. And again, he told his brothers about it. Here, can I just say that's mistake number 2? Right? If you said the first one and the brother's like, well, and then you go, I got a new one. It's not good, right? Soon Joseph had it, and he said, listen, I've had another dream. He said, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me. This time he told his dream to his father. And his father scolded him. What kind of dream is this, he asked. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? See, this is what I learned. This is those family dynamics, right? Brothers are like, no, we ain't going to do it. He tells dad now the story, and dad's like, really? Your mother and I? You think this is going to happen? He's like, I don't think so, Tiny Tim. It's not happening. And in this moment, things start to change. In fact, in verse 11, it says, but while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dreams meant. Now, I want to remind you that last week, we talked about Jacob and the dream that he had of a stairway to heaven. This is the same Jacob we talked about last week. So I'm wondering if he's sitting there going, is this a God dream that's been given to my son? What's happening here? See, this is all how Joseph's dream starts with God, right? Home with his family, loved by his father. He's dreaming of this destination of being the leader of all, and they're all bowing down before him. Who knows? Maybe he went and got his leadership journal, and he started planning out the process and how, they're going to have this flow chart where Joseph's at the top and everybody's in charge, right? Who knows? But all of a sudden, his big story, it changes. And I want you to understand, Joseph's story is big, it's long, and if you read it through the Bible, it's from Genesis chapter 37 to Genesis chapter 46. So we can't read the whole thing today. There's no way, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a Google Map drive of Joseph's life. And we're going to use Google Map directions to see what happens. Because I want you to understand that the destination is clear, but the directions are so far from direct. And so our hope is that we walk through this story of Joseph and kind of take a look at how our life is the exact same. So Joseph tells his brother and his father the dreams. Joseph's brothers are ticked off. Joseph goes to visit his brothers out in the field while they're taking care of things. And Joseph's brothers decide, you know what? We're going to get rid of Joseph. And they actually, in Genesis, it actually says that the brothers thought about killing him, but they went, nah, he's family. I'm like, oh, so nice, right? So they decide not to kill him, but this is what happens. Genesis chapter 37, verse 28. So when the Ishmaelites, who are Midianite traders, came by, Joseph's brothers pulled him out of the cistern, that's where they hid him, and sold him to them for 20 pieces of silver. And the traders took him to Egypt. Okay, let's just look at it. This is an off-ramp, right? This is an off-ramp of what it looks like when God is giving us directions, right? His off-ramp dropped off big time, right? So Joseph is sold into slavery. His brothers fake his death to tell their father. The father is just so wiped out. And I know many of us sit there and go, well, my family wouldn't sell me into slavery. My friends wouldn't do this. But how many times has our friends just sold us out? Right? Just kind of dropped us off. Maybe you're really good friends and all of a sudden they just disappear. They start ghosting you. Here's the thing. Maybe it wasn't somebody that did it to you. Maybe you did it to yourself. Maybe you're the one that created the off-ramp because of what you've done in your... Maybe it was crime. Maybe it was addiction. Maybe it's just flat out lying. And it leads you to an off-ramp of where you're supposed to go. How many of us have experienced an off-ramp in our dreams and our directions? If you're sitting there, not me, then you're a good liar. I'm just saying. Here's what I want you to understand. So we go and Joseph is sold into slavery, and we read in Genesis chapter 39, verse 1, where he ends up. When Joseph was taken to Egypt by the Ishmaelite traders, he was purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer. Potiphar was the captain of the guard for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Okay, so we have the off-ramp, and now he's bought by Potiphar, who's kind of a guy that's in charge of things. I'm kind of looking like this. This is a detour, right? This is a detour. He's going to be in leadership, but he just doesn't know it yet. In fact, when he's put in charge of Potiphar's house, because he does so well, it says that God is with him, and Potiphar has success everywhere. All of his business flourishes, all of the things that he touches because Joseph's involved becomes amazing. Except one place, his marriage. His marriage is not in a good place. In fact, Potiphar's wife constantly is throwing herself at Joseph. Because in this portion of the story, it actually says that Joseph is handsome and he's well built. So I understand his struggle. I'm just saying. You're not supposed to laugh. Come on, man. No, I'm just kidding. Right? It's kind of like Pastor Aaron said a couple of weeks ago. He was ruddy. Oh, he's ruddy, right? So Joseph, being a man of honor, a man of faith, will not do anything with her. In fact, he makes the statement, I can't do this because I know it's a sin against God. It's not what God wants for me. But in that moment, she takes advantage of Joseph, and she's actually able to lie to the servants and eventually to her husband about Joseph. And this is what happens to Joseph. Genesis chapter 39, verse 20. So he took Joseph and he threw him into prison, where the king's prisoners were held. And there he remained. Here's what I want you to understand about this right here. When it says that he is thrown where the king's prisoners were held, the king had a special place, deep, dark, in the center of his dungeon that was reserved for only people he was mad at. People that he didn't want to be around. So Joseph's not just in prison. Joseph is in the deep, darkest place of prison in this moment. Now, I don't know about you, but as I was reading through this story, I started to think, you know what? This looks like a dead end. This looks like a dead end, right? He's in prison. He's been sentenced by someone for something he didn't do. There's no way he's going to get out. But again, you can read in the story where it says, God is with him. So the warden actually puts Joseph in charge of all of the other prisoners. Success even in the midst of the prison, a dead end, and God is still with him. See, while in prison, the dreamer, Joseph, also interprets dreams. And he interprets the dream of the cupbearer and the chief baker. Now, I'm not going to explain everything that went on, but the cupbearer actually gets his job back. The chief baker, well, he ends up dead. Well, the cupbearer gets his job back and he's like, yay. And Joseph, after he told him his dreams, he's like, hey, by the way, if anything happens, just kind of tell the Pharaoh about me. Does the cupbearer do that? No. Oh, no. I got my job back. What about the guy in prison? Right? Until the Pharaoh has a dream. Now, here's what I want you to understand. God has a way of taking dead things and bringing them back to life. He has people he's done it with and dreams and lives. And so Joseph is not at a dead end. He's just paused. And 2 years later, hear that, 2 years later, the Pharaoh has dreams. And all of a sudden these dreams happen and guess who remembers? The cupbearer. Oh yeah. There's this Hebrew guy in prison that interpreted my dreams. Maybe he can interpret yours. Pharaoh's like, get him. So they go get Joseph out of prison, clean him up, shave him, get him ready. He goes in because everybody else has tried to interpret the king Pharaoh's dreams and no one got it right. And Pharaoh is freaking out. Joseph steps in, he goes, here, I want you to understand, I'm not interpreting this, God is. God gives me this ability, and so I'm trusting God to help me interpret your dream. Pharaoh's like, I don't care, just figure this out. Because, I mean, think about it. If you don't know the dreams, they're kind of weird, right? Pharaoh has a dream that at one point in time, these stalks of, these cows, I should say, these 5 cows come walking up out of the river, and they're huge and they're fat. And then these 7 skinny cows show up, and the 7 skinny cows eat the 7 fat cows. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I'm just saying, right? And Pharaoh's like, what does this mean? And then he has 7 fat heads of grain and 7 skinny heads of grain. And what happens is the skinny ones eat the fat ones again. And Pharaoh's like, man, there's a lot of fat people getting eaten. I don't know what's going on. Right? And so here's what we need to understand. God is telling Pharaoh what he's about to do. He says, okay, you're going to have 7 banner banquet amazing years. And then you're going to have 7 years of famine. So you better get ready. And Joseph interprets this for Pharaoh. And what does Pharaoh do? Read this in Genesis chapter 41, verse 40 and 41. You will be in charge of my court, and all of my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt, from prisoner to governor. Right? Dreamer to being back on the dream. Here's the way I kind of thought about it. This is an alternative route, right? He's still in leadership, but it's not the leadership he originally started with. Remember, the dream was that his family bowed down to him, but now the whole nation of Egypt is going to bow down to him. In fact, Pharaoh gives him his ring, his robe. He tells him to go walk around Egypt, and he says, guess what? Anytime you walk around, if people don't bow down, let me know. Because I'll let them know about the place you used to hang out in. And so Joseph in this moment is experiencing a huge change. Have you ever had one of those alternate route moments? Where you end up doing something different than you thought you would be doing? Joseph, his life is changed that way. In fact, Pharaoh gives him a new name, gives him a wife, and then eventually Joseph has 2 children. Now, I thought it was very appropriate that you understand the names of the 2 children because it says a lot about what Joseph is going through. See, his first son was named Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family. Can you hear Joseph's heart? I've moved on. I know there's something new. His second son is named Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief. I got to be honest. I think some of us end up in grief and we miss out what God is leading us to because we get stuck there. I know it's hard. I know it's painful. I know that the emotions are overwhelming. But God says to Joseph, even in the midst of your grief, I'm going to make you fruitful. I'm going to enable you to do things you didn't think you would do. So Joseph, moving forward, trusting God, enabling to see that God is with him, starts to prepare for the famine. And they have 7 amazing years, and then that famine hits, and it hits hard. It doesn't even just hit Egypt. It hits all of the surrounding countries. In fact, it hits the country of Canaan where his family is. So what happens? Well, that means his brothers have to come to Egypt to get grain, or they're not going to survive. And that's where we read Genesis chapter 42, verses 6 through 9. Verse 6, since Joseph was governor of all Egypt and in charge of selling grain to all the people, it was to him that his brothers came. When they arrived, they bowed before him with their faces to the ground. Dream number 1. Joseph recognized his brothers instantly, but he pretended to be a stranger and he spoke to them harshly. Where are you from? He demanded. We're from the land of Canaan, they replied. We have come to buy food. Verse 8, although Joseph recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. And here's the key verse, verse 9. And he remembered the dreams he'd had about them many years before. Divine destination. The dream gets its final destination. His brothers show up and they bow before him. The thing that they said they would never do, they do. The thing that Joseph thought maybe would never happen because he had forgotten all about his whole family, happens. Now we got to figure, this has got to be like between 15 and 20 years since they've seen Joseph. And so in this moment, Joseph is going, dream fulfilled. It's happened. And Joseph remembers the moment. In fact, God is the one that gives the destination. And God is also the one that directs our paths. And I guarantee you, Joseph never thought this is the way things were going to end up. See, but we get to see where God is destined not because of us, but because of who he is. And we just need to be doing one thing. Trust him. Trust him. Be faithful and be willing to trust God even when we don't know what's going on. Because when we do, we can see things the way Joseph does. Here, I want you to read with me what happens later. Now, there's a whole lot happens between Joseph recognizing his brothers and Joseph revealing himself to his brothers. There's a lot that goes on there. I'm not going to unpack all that. I'm going to challenge you. Go read the story for yourself so you see that how it comes out to play, because he sends his brothers off. They come back. He accuses one brother of stealing, keeps him, and the dad is just freaking out, another son. And all of a sudden the brothers come back and we have this moment. Joseph is in his big, massive palace, and he's invited his brothers to have a meal. And as he's looking at his brothers, God moves on his heart. He kicks out all of his Egyptian servants, and this is what happens. I am Joseph, he said to his brothers. Is my father still alive? Now, I don't know if you can read between the lines, but he goes, I'm Joseph, is dad still alive? And they're going, squeeze me, baking powder, right? You've got all this going. Look what it says. But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. Verse 4, Joseph goes, come closer. Look at my face. I'm your brother. And he said again, I'm Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery to Egypt. Now, here's the part we need to look at. Verse 5, but don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. Verse 6, the famine that has ravaged the land for 2 years will last 5 more years, and there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. Verse 7, God has sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors. Verse 8, so it was God who sent me here, not you. And he's the one who made an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of his entire palace, and the governor of all Egypt. Here's what we need to understand about God dreams. Because many of us may not understand where we're at right now, what we're going through right now, and that's okay. Because God dream destinations reveal divine reasons in the end. What's the statement, right? Hindsight is always 20/20. Right? We always see best when we're looking back. Because then we're able to see, oh, this is where God was at work. This is what he was doing. This is so powerful what he's been doing. See, I believe some of you are here today because God goes, I want to have a relationship with you. I want you to know me. See, because God created us to have a relationship with him. That's why we're here. We're not an oops. We're not a mistake, no matter what someone's told us. And our sins, and we do sin, separate us from God. And we're never going to be good enough to fix that. And so God, being powerful, wise, omnipotent, sent his son Jesus to die on the cross to pay the price for our sins. And everyone who trusts in Jesus, and Jesus only, can have a relationship with God that starts now and lasts forever. Maybe the reason you're here today or watching online is because God has brought you to this place to enter into a relationship with him. Maybe that's why. Here, so with all this in mind, I want to share with you something very personal, very powerful, an example of this playing out in my life, in the life of this church. See, we planted Elevation 13 years ago in Dalton Elementary, the elementary school that I went to as a kid. Really weird, by the way, right? And we moved around, we did the portable thing, and God used us to care for the schools and the city. And then 9 years ago, we moved into this building, something I never imagined would happen so fast. And then 3 years ago, we were a part of building the apartments behind us. We were able to be a part of God using us in that way. And God placed a vision in my heart and my family's life to start a church. And that's what's happened. But I want you to know there's something new coming. And so I want you to check out this video.
Hey, Aaron Chambers here from Journey Christian Church in Greeley, Colorado. I'm here with my friend
Scott Bloyer from Elevation Christian Church in Aurora.
And we've been friends for a long time. We reconnected recently at a retreat, and God started doing something, and it was something that we hadn't anticipated.
Not at all. Not at all. It was great, though, because we were able to see just kind of where there was this passion for what God is doing. Not just in Greeley, not just in Aurora, but Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado. So here's the deal. After a lot of prayer, a lot of discussions, a lot of meetings, we're going to merge. Our churches are going to merge together. And we're excited about that.
It's going to be an awesome opportunity to see how God can work in one church in many places.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. We're going to become one church. It's going to be called Journey Christian Church in Aurora. And but here's the deal. God has done an incredible work in Aurora. It is still doing incredible work. So if you're a part of Elevation Christian Church, don't go anywhere.
Exactly.
It's going to get even better. And if you're part of Journey Christian Church, don't freak out. God knows what he's doing. God brought us together, and we're both in for this ride. And it's exciting to think what God could do. But we know you may have questions. I will tell you, as we're walking through this, we're still trying to figure some things out too. But what we do know is this, is that God is doing a great work, and he wants to bring us together to do that.
Because we're going to be better together. God's brought different people with different giftings to do great things, and we're just going to be doing it together.
Yeah. So here's the thing. A great story, as you know, a great story is about somebody who wants something and overcomes a challenge to get it. And we understand that the upcoming days are going to be challenging. Bring your questions. Expect to hear from us more clarity. We have no specific dates, but we just know it's happening. But here's the deal. As you go through these challenges, understand it's an opportunity for us as churches to come together and to live a better story.
Okay, so we're going to be merging with Journey Christian Church. We're going to be Journey Christian Church Aurora. They're going to be Journey Christian Church Greeley. There's already Journey Christian Church Sterling. If you don't know that, we helped them start a campus in the prison. In fact, we've got one campus already on the east side, which is the minimum security. Starting in the next couple of weeks, we're starting another one on the maximum side in there. Now, here's the other thing you may not know. We also have been actively involved in Buena Vista. So every week, Journey Christian Church's services, their messages have been being pumped into Buena Vista, the prison in Buena Vista. And so I am getting letters already about what are you going to do here? How are you going to come? I'm like, I don't know, right? Here's the thing. We don't know what this all looks like. What you need to know is this. Nobody here is going anywhere. No staff members getting fired, no pastors getting kicked to the curb. This is not like some business hostile takeover where they walk in. See, this is God's family. This is God. And what I want you to hear from me is what we started 13 years ago is just going to continue on. It's just going to have a different name. And I'll be honest with you, can I be brutally? I'm okay with the name change because our church is Elevation Christian Church. I don't know how many times I get an email or a phone call going, is Pastor Stephen Furtick going to be there? We're not Elevation, North Carolina. And so we get that all the time. And I'm like, journey, let's go, right? We're going on a journey. So I want you to know this is a good thing. This is a powerful thing. And I want you to know that God is the God of dreams. The destination has always been the church. So just hang on. Just hang on. This is going to be an amazing part of our journey. We're committed to journeying with Christ, with the church, for the community. So enjoy the journey, but don't enjoy it alone. So let's end with our questions, right? Here's what we need to think about. This is a head question. What do I need to know? Or what do I know now? I know now that God is the one that gives us followers dreams. And they're dreams that are for his purposes and for his glory and for his worship. But we also need to know that those directions for those dreams are not always going to be what we expect. And so we need to be able to, in those times, trust him. Trust him. If there's a reroute, don't argue with the reroute. If there's an off-ramp, don't panic because God's got a reason for that off-ramp. If there's a dead end, God has a way of taking dead things and making them alive again. Maybe it's a passion. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a business. We don't know, but we need to be willing to trust him. How does this change me? This should actually change the way we view what is happening in our lives when it comes to the dreams and visions that God gives us. We need to be willing to follow, not freak out. We need to be willing to say that God is in control and I am not. Lean into your relationship with Jesus and listen and learn for what he's doing in the process, because we know that when it's all said and done, we can be just like Joseph and say, but God is the one who sent me. God is the one who sent me. So what do we do now? What do we do now? I believe that many of us need to be willing to trust God. Trust that he's a plan. Trust that he knows the way. Trust that all the detours, off-ramps, and dead ends are for a reason. And we need to be willing to keep trusting him, even especially when we don't get it. Especially when we don't get it. Some of us are right now in the middle of a detour in our life, and we're freaking out, we're panicking, and God's going, just wait. Just trust me. Some of us are on an off-ramp. We're not sure what this off-ramp looks like. And so we're worried. And so Jesus is going, no, just trust me. Just trust me. Some of us may feel like we're in a dead end. And we can't go forward and we can't go back. So what do? Trust him. And I know some of you are sitting there going, you don't know my situation, you don't know what's going on. No, I may not, but here's the thing. God is still the same God in your life as he is mine. And so if we trust him, we trust him. We have to be willing to trust him. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask each and every one of you to close your eyes, bow your head. See, we believe that anytime we come into a conversation with God and we interact with the Word of God, there are decisions we need to make, responses. So maybe today you've realized you have never said yes to a personal relationship with Jesus. We want to help you respond to that moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you to pray a prayer. And there's nothing magical about this prayer. It is just simply you verbalizing, saying yes to a relationship with Jesus. So that maybe someday you can say on August 13th, I remember saying yes to Jesus. So if that's you, I'm just going to simply ask you to pray this prayer. Just say, Dear Jesus, thank you for creating me and loving me even when I choose to live life my own way. Today I do realize that I need a personal relationship with you, so I'm ready for everything to change in my life. Today I ask you to forgive me of my sins. I want to thank you for dying on the cross and paying the price for my sins. I am putting my faith in you today as my only hope of going to heaven. Jesus, take control of my life. Change me from the inside out into a new person. Jesus, help me to grow in my faith from now on as I follow after you. Amen.